Okay, so we're going to get going. There's no sugarcoating this. This isn't the most interesting, engaging session. It's very difficult to make plagiarism fun. I've tried and I thought, no, don't even try. It's information sharing. So you all know I love an engaging, interactive session, but actually the importance of this is just getting information across to you and making sure that you've got the knowledge. So there won't be a lot of interaction. Obviously, I'll come and ask you for your opinions on certain things, but there will be a lot of information that I just need to pass on to you. I'm going to try and finish this by 4 o'clock so that I can dial Dan in for the last 15 minutes for him to do his end of day talk so that we don't run over on time. So I'm going to try my best with that. So there's a few things I might have planned that I'm going to skip through. But obviously I'll make sure you all get the PowerPoint afterwards so you can go back and reflect. But hopefully we should cover everything anyway. Okay, so we're looking at preventing plagiarism from being an option. It'd be helpful if I could say the word, wouldn't it? Everything that's already been covered today in the sessions in terms of all your online safety. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand or put something in the chat box. I'll happily come to you. The aims and the outcomes for today. So really, we just want to gain an understanding of what plagiarism is. Sometimes can be named malpractice, same sort of thing, really. So plagiarism and malpractice and assessment to gain an understanding of all these strategies that we can use to identify plagiarism and malpractice. And to gain an understanding of the strategies to minimise the risk of malpractice by candidates. As part of that, we'll look at what is plagiarism, why is it wrong, what are the drivers for candidates plagiarising, how can we prevent this from occurring, how to identify plagiarism and malpractice, and then what we do with that information. And then we'll briefly touch upon the use of plagiarism detection software and Harvard referencing. Now, the reason for putting on this session is because I have noticed a lot of plagiarism recently. I think as we've moved to a more virtual learning model, it's become more prominent. And I personally think it's just due to lack of awareness from both candidates and tutors and assessors. So I don't think it's people deliberately trying to do something which is wrong, but what we need to do is make sure that you're all upskilled in order to then upskill your candidates. Okay, so if you've got a piece of paper in front of you, if you could just write down the answers for these, and then we'll just come back quickly and look at them again afterwards and look at the answers. Quick plagiarism quiz for you. So you are guilty of plagiarism if you A, make use of the works of others to gather information, B, use the work of another and misrepresent it as your own, C, make use of the works of others to support your own arguments, or D, examine the ideas and arguments of others to help you shape your own thoughts or views on a particular issue. So there is one answer there, A, B, C, or D. Just write it down, what you think it is. Question 2. Paraphrasing too closely to the original text, even if you do credit the source, is still considered as plagiarism because A, by changing a few words or the order of the original words, you have changed the author's exact words. B, by not providing the exact words of the author in their entirety, you are attributing to the author some words that he, she did not write. C, you must never use the words of others when you're using their ideas. Or D, you have failed to indicate by means of direct quotation marks which are the exact words of the original. A, B, C, or D. Okay, moving on to question 3. Why is it insufficient to cite sources for your work through a bibliography alone? A, because no one will know what works you consulted in the preparation of your essay. B, because a bibliography does not provide specific page references for the sections of your sources that you actually read when you were doing your research. Or C, because by doing so you fail to indicate the exact sources of each specific passage. Don't worry if you do not know the answers to these. We're obviously going to go over them. Okay, next question. Gina was assigned an essay on the current topic. Last year, they had a similar assignment in a different class. They take their old essay, update the introductory paragraph, and change a few body paragraph sentences before turning it into this year's teacher. Did Gina commit plagiarism? Yes or no? Okay, next one. These lines were taken from students' papers. Which of them contains plagiarized content? A, US President Barack Obama served 2 terms holding office from 2009 to 2016. US President Ronald Reagan served many years as a Hollywood actor before entering politics. Or C, US President Franklin D. Roosevelt held the office from 1933 to 1945, helping to pull Americans out of the Great Depression. Which, if any, contain plagiarized content? Okay, I think this is the last one. Peter is doing a remote virtual program and is working towards a level 2 certificate in preparing to work in adult social care. All learning and assessment is conducted and submitted via Equal, which is our online platform. Peter answers the assessment questions using the Equal learning resources, using all of the examples from the guidance. Is this plagiarism? Yes or no? We're going to come back to the reflection point when we look at the answers. Okay, so we're just going to quickly whiz back in and look at the answers. Okay, so the first one was you're guilty of plagiarism if you what? Would anybody like to answer what one they think that it is? You can do it in the chat.
B.
I think it's B.
Chat.
Anybody else suggest different? No, we're saying B. Excellent, you are correct. It is B. So this is plagiarism because you are deliberately trying to suggest that the idea or the wording was your own, and it wasn't, obviously. It was plagiarism. Okay, second one. Paraphrasing too closely to the original text, even if you do credit the source, is still considered as plagiarism because. Which answer are we going for? This one's quite difficult because they're all quite similar. D, yes. Most people seem to be going for D. You are correct again. So the rule is that whenever you use more than 3 consecutive words of an original text, you must put them in quotation marks. Otherwise, that is plagiarism. Okay, why is it insufficient to cite sources from your work through a bibliography alone? Oh, we've got a mixture. Again, this one, the answers are quite similar, so this is difficult. Okay, so the majority have gone for B. Now, the answer is actually C. And that's because a bibliography is only the list of sources that you consulted while researching. So it doesn't specifically give credit to the items that you included in the text. Okay, so Gina was assigned an essay on the current topic. She decided to submit an old essay, just changing a few pieces of information. Was that plagiarism? Okay. So again, a mixture of opinion on this. Essentially, yes, it is plagiarism, unless she references herself and makes it clear that she's recycling an old essay. If she just submits it and doesn't say anything to the teacher, then yes, it would be plagiarism. Okay, so which of those lines do you think might have contained plagiarised content? Very true, Gemma. No. Okay, so it is actually none, and that's because they are all just generally accepted facts, so they're common knowledge, and they wouldn't be attributed to a specific source. Okay, and then finally, Peter's doing his virtual remote program using Equal. He uses the learning resources from the guidance. Is that plagiarism? Okay, again, a mixture. So again, yes, it is plagiarism, unless he specifically says, I am using these, and he puts them in quotation marks. But generally, what Peter has done is he's just paraphrased. So he's taken all of the content from the resources, and then he's just changed an odd word. And that means that that's not his own knowledge. That doesn't demonstrate learning and understanding. That's him just taking stuff from one place and putting it onto another without giving a reference and without correctly without correctly putting a citation on it. Okay, any questions about that? Anything that that's come out of that you think I didn't know that, or you'd like to challenge? Yeah. So just a little reflection point. So if it's plagiarism from using learning resources which have been provided on an online platform, is it plagiarism if they use stuff that's come from a teacher's presentation. So if the learning and the teaching and learning comes from you as the teacher, and you deliver a PowerPoint or you deliver information to them and they use that information, do we think that's plagiarism?
I would say no, because particularly in a classroom, we might go through questions as a group, and they've all focused on the same answer. So I would say no to that one.
Yeah. Again, it's not a clear cut yes or no. It would depend where the tutor has got their information from. So if the tutor has gone through the internet and unintentionally plagiarized, so taken loads of information and put it on a PowerPoint and then they use it, well, down the line they could be brought up for plagiarizing, couldn't they? Because it could be identified as being plagiarism. So the teacher needs to be very careful about how they are given the content, and making sure that they are referencing within their materials as well. Okay, right, moving on. So what is plagiarism? So we were going to do a bit of an interactive activity here using Menti, but you've already done that this afternoon and we're going to whiz through. But again, using the chat bar, or if you'd like to raise your hand and speak, just let me know give me one word that comes to mind when you think of plagiarism. Fraud, yeah, good. Laziness, yeah. Fibbing, copying, yeah. Google. Cheating, yeah, absolutely. It is cheating. All of those words are correct. So plagiarism is presenting somebody else's work or ideas as your own with or without their consent, and then incorporating it into your own work without full acknowledgement. So that is the key here. It can be intentional, it can also be unintentional, and most of the time it probably is unintentional. And under the regulations for examinations, intentional or reckless plagiarism is a disciplinary offence. So at high level in education, it would be considered disciplinary offence and the student would fail. But generally, that's because it's been considered to be intentional. And just to make sure I'm referencing correctly, I'm putting where I've got this information onto every slide in my PowerPoint. Okay, so different types of plagiarism. So using quotes without clear acknowledgement. So the use of quotation marks, not using quotation marks correctly, and then without full referencing of the sources cited. Cutting and pasting from the internet or any other source, such as the learning resources on Equal, without clear acknowledgement, and then without referencing it, including it in a big bibliography. Paraphrasing the work of others by altering a few words or changing their order, again, without giving full acknowledgement to the author. Collusion, so unauthorised collaboration between students or a failure to attribute assistance received. So quite often within a classroom environment, students might work together, but they do need to demonstrate their own knowledge on that. So if everybody's produced the same thing, that might be deemed as plagiarism. Inaccurate citation, and again, there's my reference. So which one do you think is most common for the candidates that you work with? Yes, Tori?
I think a lot of students, when they're given a task to do, obviously they just go on Google and then they'll copy and paste a lot of their work.
Yeah.
Instead of reading it, understanding it, and writing their own understanding.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it's on purpose? Are they doing it to deliberately be a cheat?
Some of them, it's not all of them, and it's only like every now and again. And then obviously you say, no, look, you're doing it on your own. This is just so you get a better understanding of things. So, and then they carry on like if it needs to be changed, they change it. So I don't think it's intentionally at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, most people are saying cutting and pasting. Shannon said they don't understand or know about referencing. 100%. So most of the time it's just due to them not being educated in what references is. I would say paraphrasing is another big one. Again, like cutting and pasting, they're putting the same information in, but sometimes they decide to just change words around or change sentences around. I think that that's okay, but they haven't put that into their own words. So it's still obviously plagiarism. So as I just said, paraphrasing, it's not okay unless they do it correctly. So generally, they'll just lift a direct phrase from another piece of work. They'll change a few words, they'll claim it as their own. Learning how to do it properly is very important. But that doesn't mean that you don't need to cite it correctly. So any other work that you're looking at and using the ideas, even if you put it in your own words, you still need to make sure that you are acknowledging that you've looked at that work. And I think, again, there is a confusion there. People will think if I don't put a direct quote in there, then I don't need to reference it. But if you've looked at a piece of work and you've used the ideas and you've then explained it in your own words, you still need to reference that. Okay, so why is plagiarism wrong? We've gone through this already, really, with you saying what your keywords are, because it's fraud, because it's cheating, because it's copying. The main thing is that it doesn't demonstrate knowledge and understanding from that candidate. So we can't ethically put them forward for a qualification of certificate if we don't know that they've actually learned that content. It doesn't provide sufficient evidence that they've done that. And there's lots of other reasons as well, such as it makes the organisation look bad. It puts them at a disadvantage. It puts them at an advantage over others who may have done it differently, who may have put the work in. You know, it can make the assessor look really bad if they haven't picked up on it as well. So, you know, professional incompetence. And also it can just be disrespectful and betray the trust of your assessor or tutor as well. Has anyone got anything they'd like to add to that before I move on? No? Okay. So what are the drivers for candidates plagiarising? So as we've talked about, the most common reason is usually because of just a lack of awareness, that they don't understand what plagiarism is, they don't understand how to reference correctly. Sorry, Tori, did you want to say something?
Yeah, sorry. I don't know why. I don't know if people are still their audio on, but it keeps echoing really badly. I can't hear you properly.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just mine or everyone else's as well.
No,
sorry.
It's quite an echo on mine actually, but I've got my mute off on. Sorry, and it's not on any other tabs. So yeah, but I can hear. But yeah, it's strange.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Sorry, I've got no one else in the room with me. Yeah, apologies about that. Hopefully we can get through with you being able to hear me. Let me know if it gets so bad.
No, it's actually all right now.
Okay. Okay, so sorry, lost my train of thought. Yeah, most common reason is because of lack of awareness, but also they will commit plagiarism mainly because they don't know the answer, and that might indicate that the teaching was weak in that area. They might not believe that plagiarism is wrong, and that might be because they download music and video clips and games all the time. They may not understand the concept of individual ownership of ideas and words. So again, just that lack of awareness. They think if it's on the internet, I can take it. Or if it's in a guidance manual, I can take it. They don't understand that somebody owns that and somebody's got the rights to that. They might regard the conventions of academic documentation as unimportant or irrelevant to them. So maybe they don't want to do the course. Maybe they don't care about that qualification and they just want to get it done. Lack referencing skills, therefore be unable to record and cite sources correctly. And also, similar to that, lack the study skills and the research skills and the writing skills needed to produce the work required. So maybe initial assessment hasn't been successful and they're not they shouldn't be doing that course. Maybe they're not at the correct level. Maybe they don't have the right information. Or they might just regard plagiarism as a shortcut to success. And that might not be intentional. That might just be because they don't understand what plagiarism is. And they think the easiest way for me to answer this question is just to Google it and cut and paste the information. So how can we prevent this from occurring? So this is quite wordy here, I apologise. But the most important thing you can do is contribute to a culture in which candidates do not consider plagiarism an option. So there's a few things that you can try. And there's some things coming through on the chat that I'll come back to in just a minute. So most importantly, your organisation needs to have clear policies and procedures relating to plagiarism and other forms of academic misconduct, which we do at SSG, and I'm going to briefly show you in a minute. It should all be covered with you in your employment induction, but if you're not familiar with the policies, make sure that you go away and check those now at the end of the session. You need to be explaining in induction what is meant by plagiarism and how it will be monitored and policed. So you need to educate your candidates. You need to make sure they know exactly what it is and why they shouldn't do it. Explain the concepts of individual ownership of ideas, words and material, and the difference between intellectual property and common knowledge. So in our quiz earlier, we discussed how something was common knowledge. Generally, if you're teaching a topic, you will have common knowledge on it. So in your presentation, you'll be sharing things that you know already because it's common knowledge to you. So that's in which case it's not plagiarised. But if you're specifically researching and using things from the internet, as we said, you're taking somebody else's intellectual property. So you need to let them know that that's not your own words. That was somebody else's. So you make sure that they're then referencing that in their work. You need to provide instruction in study skills, research skills, writing skills, time management skills, and the use of a suitable referencing system to record and cite sources correctly. And I'll come back to that later on the types of referencing. And you need to insist that they use referencing and bibliographies from day one, which means that every time they research something, every time they look somewhere, that they note that down so that they don't forget where they've got it from. You need to make sure that there's an authenticity statement with every assignment brief. We all know about those. It's a disclaimer to say that it's their own work and that they understand why they're signing that. I think they probably don't read that statement, so it's up to you to explain what that statement is and why they're signing. You need to also provide them with opportunities to discuss any problems that they may encounter and support them at each step and provide them with the resources they need to do the work properly. So I think it was Amy who said earlier, sometimes it's due to a tight deadline or them not having enough time to do something. So it's the quickest way for them to answer the question and get the work in. So you need to make sure that you're giving them that support from the start, and that if they have any problems with any particular topics or assignments, that you're on top of that from day one and that they've got that support there. You need to ensure that candidates are not overloaded by providing them with an assessment schedule. So they understand the assessment deadlines from the very beginning and they're not overloaded with their assessment. Encourage candidates to annotate their source material to make it clear how they're using it in their work. We've talked about that already. So they're noting down everything for their bibliography from the very beginning. Provide candidates with concrete examples of plagiarism so they better understand the concept. So going back to that induction, when you're explaining what plagiarism is, some good examples of plagiarism would be good at that point to show them this is still plagiarism, because they may not think that it is. They may not understand that's what plagiarism is. And then you could maybe give them the opportunity to practice citing and quoting or paraphrasing before they submit their final assessment. Okay, so I'm just going to look quickly at the chat.
Jen, just a
Yeah.
quick question. So how much though, okay, you're absolutely fine to use it with all the citations and everything, but how much in an answer can they use of others and cite it correctly? I mean, can they start off with a citation, then translate it in their opinion? Or, I mean, what if they use really good examples, but that answer to that question was 100% plagiarized, but they've acknowledged it and said, I couldn't say it better myself? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, no, that's not acceptable, is it? Because they're not demonstrating their own knowledge. So they can 100% take examples and take ideas from others, but it's meant to support their own opinion. You'd only put a quotation in an essay to support what you're saying. You wouldn't put it there to say what you want to say. So if they have provided a whole essay or assignment that has come from somebody else's thinking, they're not demonstrating their own understanding there. So it's your professional judgment on whether you think it's too much or not. If they provided a whole essay from, say, the Equal Learning Resource and then put the reference on the end, well, obviously they are referencing, so they're saying, yeah, I used it, but it still doesn't demonstrate their understanding, so then it wouldn't be acceptable. So we wouldn't necessarily say, well, you plagiarized, because they have attempted to reference it. They've just misunderstood what they were meant to do with that information. Okay, so I've got hope some may not have an understanding of plagiarism based on previous learning experiences. Yeah, you know, it might not have been explained to them properly in other education, 100%. Amy, some it's due to being too close to the deadline. They're rushing to complete. Yeah, we talked about that. Hope need to teach students how to reference, particularly if we are helping them to achieve post-course, move on to, for example, university. Yes, very good point. So for our 16 to 18, referencing once they get to university will be a whole nother level. So getting them used to those study skills. Very good point. Okay, so how to identify plagiarism and malpractice. So these are a few things that I've looked for recently and that other people have told me about. The biggest one for me is inconsistencies in their work. So they suddenly start using more advanced terms. Their grammar and spelling is much better quality than they've demonstrated previously. You know, the first two assignments they submitted, the grammar was, you know, really, really bad. They weren't using very formal terms. And then all of a sudden in assignment 3, it's perfect and all the grammar is correct and there's lots of advanced terms in there. Then I would start thinking, not sure about that. The use of information that are familiar to the assessor, but they haven't appropriately referenced it. So within what you're teaching, for example, I teach education and training, the same 3 units every time. So I see essays coming through for that all the time, and I will always know if something has come from an internet source or a book, because I've seen those answers 20 million times. So the assessor being familiar with the common sources that might be used, it can be as simple as going onto Google and typing in the essay title and what the first 3 sites that come up, because that's basically what they use. I mean, they won't generally go through to the 9th site. They'll use the first one or the second one. So you being familiar with that content. The use of American spellings, this is another major one. So they're copying and pasting and they're just keeping the Americanized spellings in there. That one is used. That one is a very good indicator that it's not their own work. Also, I'm not sure if I've covered it, but I think it was might have been Amy yesterday, or somebody was saying if they've copied and pasted and it's had like bullet points in there, when they've copied and pasted it across, sometimes the bullet point doesn't transfer in the same way. Was that you, Amy?
Yeah, it turns, instead of it being a bullet point, it sometimes turns into like one of the little wingdings or a little tiny symbol that's different, and it often appears. It might be a bullet point on the copied version at the beginning of the sentence, but quite often when it's been pasted over, it just pops up in the middle of a paragraph. Yeah, absolutely.
And also just a change of font.
Yeah, I'm going to come on to that actually.
Sorry.
So yeah, if you suspect anything for any of those reasons, you know, the Americanized spellings, you'll think, oh, that sounds familiar, I've seen it somewhere, or, you know, the standard of work. Just try typing in that text into a search engine, into Google, and it may help to identify if it has come from the website or not. A couple of other indicators, as Mike just said, irregularities in the use of the font, text size, layout. So, you know, it might be in the same paragraph, the font is different or the text size is different. We see that quite a lot. Check their progress and their content regularly, so picking up on it from a very early stage, and then educating them on their referencing and their use of citations. You might want to look at building an oral element into the exam process to check on their understanding. So a professional discussion, for example, to where, you know, they can't plagiarise because they have to talk and tell you what they think. Or also getting them to elaborate on any suspect passages within their work. And then obviously you can use a plagiarism detection software. Has anyone got any others that they've seen, first-hand experience, that has indicated that there might be plagiarism there that hasn't been covered?
It does come up quite a lot on Equal. When I was using Equal, I mean, they hadn't even bothered to take out see page 7 subsection 2. So
Yeah.
But you're right, you can always put the text in, you will always find it. And if they are a bit more savvy, they will go 5 pages in rather than the first return, you know.
Yeah, so I've got a couple of people typing here, so I'll just wait for them to put their comments.
Jen, not sure if you've covered this already, but you might end up having plagiarising candidate.
Yeah, so yeah, we've talked about that briefly, particularly in the context of them working together in a classroom. Obviously, there's the old, you know, oh, you do my homework and I'll give you £5 trick that you would do at school, but also just, yeah, working in a classroom together and not realising that actually by writing the same answers, you know, that could be considered to be plagiarism. Oh, got people typing some, they must be typing some very long answers here. Okay, I'll come back to them. Okay, so there's just a couple of free plagiarism detection softwares on the screen, and these are ones that a couple of tutors have actually said to me they use, and that are quite effective. Obviously, you need a paid version for it to be fully effective. But I was talking to Mike yesterday, and actually just typing it into Google will normally give you the information that you need rather than having to use these. But if you're not sure, then these are there for your reference. And obviously, I'll make sure you get this PowerPoint so that you can get those. Okay, so I'm just looking at what Hope's put here. So sometimes students will change the text, etc. So it does match. However, if they have copied from a certain website, for example, the NHS, then there is a light blue grey haze behind the text, which you cannot remove. Yeah, absolutely. Emma's typing as well. I'll come back to that. Okay, so what do we do if we do think that they've plagiarised? So, you know, we've all of those, you know, all or some of those things that we've just discussed have come up and we think that they've plagiarised. Well, we do need to obviously gather the evidence, and we need to identify where it's come from. So we can't accuse them of plagiarising unless we know for sure exactly where it's come from. And then the best thing to do is then to have a chat with the candidate first. Share your evidence, and diagnose the cause. So was it intentional, or is it just a misunderstanding on their part? Do they need educating on it? If you believe that it's just that they need educating on it and it wasn't intentional, then you might want to give them a second chance. You know, we're not a university, and, you know, we're not going to start issuing people with penalties and disciplinary unless we believe that they have really intentionally cheated. And, you know, at this level, I would say no, probably they haven't. But in cases that clearly require disciplinary action, you should refer to the plagiarism assessment, malpractice and maladministration policy and procedure at your organisation, which looks like that here. So I'm not going to obviously read through the whole policy, but please make sure that you're familiar with it, and that you know where it is if you need it. Emma said, I have a guidance sheet for Microsoft Word for referencing, which has been really helpful in my apprenticeship. Happy to share this with everyone. The The tutor at Keeps shared it with me. I struggle to get my head around referencing at uni, but that is so quick and simple. Yeah, 100% Emma, if you could share that, that'd be amazing. Okay, so how should candidates reference their sources? Again, I'm not going to go through it completely because it's quite wordy, but also if Emma can share that document, that is going to be really helpful as well. But basically, they just need to clearly show where and how they've used somebody else's work within their own work, whose work it is and the source it came from. So, you know, we're not going to penalise if they haven't used a fully correct Harvard referencing system, but as long as they have attempted to tell you that it's not their own work, that's going to be good enough for us at this stage. And the best thing to do is to use the Harvard referencing guidance, because that's the most commonly used one, particularly if they're going to go on to university or higher education after this.
Jen, sorry, I just want to point out, if we are doing top end, and by that I mean level 3, it's a must. We'll get picked up by the awarding body if we don't identify that at the assessment point and then IV point. Likewise, I know it's slightly adrift from this conversation, but we have to justify having written documents rather than word process documents. Everything around that top end level 3 course is with a view to that feeding further, like say higher education and university. So we need to get in there nice and early on the rare occasions that we do deliver the level 3. Yeah,
100%. Cool. So there's the two different types of referencing, the two elements that need to Stan said need to plagiarise his document, add our logo on. You've got your in-text citation, so that's when you put a quote or an example into the body of your text that needs to be in quotation marks or needs to be indented. And then you've got your full references list at the end. So that is anything that you have looked at while you've been completing that piece of work. So you might not have directly taken text from it, but if you've looked at it and used the ideas from it, then it needs to be included in your references, in your bibliography. And then there's a document which I'm going to send to you along with the PowerPoint about Harvard referencing that hopefully will be a good match for the document that Emma's sharing, that tells you exactly how to do it. So how to reference within the text, so when you're putting a quote, and then how to reference in at the end in your bibliography or in your footnotes. Okay, any questions at all about any of that? I did warn you it's not the most interesting, and I'm sorry to end your CPD session without a really engaging session, but as I say, it's just really important to get that information across, so hopefully you've learned something new. And I've just provided my bibliography there to make sure that I haven't plagiarised. Yes, Emma.
If anyone sort of feels really confident with plagiarism referencing, I think that it would be helpful for everyone in operations if we had a one version PowerPoint that any staff member can deliver as part of, you know, your induction first session with candidates.
Yeah.
And if we've got that one standard, it means that we're all saying the same message. But there's lots of stuff that we want to do, lots of really cool ideas, especially off the back of CPD. So, which is why I wanted to just reach out if anyone feels confident with this, and wants to maybe support getting a PowerPoint up and running. I know that a staff member in my team delivered a plagiarism session with their group. Whether that person wants to shout out to me this week and volunteer, but it'll be good to get other people's
yeah, I agree, yeah.
Because I'm not the best at this sort of stuff, as I've highlighted. I couldn't reference when I was at uni, so it would be great to have people's knowledge in that. So I'll if you'd be interested in helping me out with that little PowerPoint and stuff, just give me a shout and we can get something up and running.
Yeah, and obviously by all means use the content from my PowerPoint to inform that 100%. Okay, so no, any questions? Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Dan, who's going to do his little end of CPD presentation. Let me finish sharing.
Just adding a few extras in because we're going to be joined by some of the non-operational guys. Just bear with me.
Obviously, we're recording this session. Would you want to keep recording?
No, you can unrecord that, and then we can